Obviously, excited to get into Big Ten play, but before we could jump into our Penn State prep, obviously a long flight back on Friday night, and then Saturday for us as coaches. Saturday and Sunday were a lot of personal inventory, not just the Kansas game, but also the first two games, just as a collective unit to see what people see of us. I think that's a very important thing for us as coaches to recognize what our opponents are seeing against us, offense, defense, special teams. So really took a self-inventory on Saturday. Had a lot of good conversations, but also then kind of came back and revisited them on Sunday, and then obviously begin to jump into our Penn State prep. They played obviously an early game on Saturday, so we weren't going to get that film until about 2:30 that day. So took kind of a collective breath to get to there. Amazingly, we're pretty healthy. I think coming out of two games, had a couple guys get some injuries on Saturday, but nothing that's going to eliminate anybody out. I believe I heard you guys ask Aaron, Matt Bailey should be back with us this week. It'd be nice to get him back in rotation, not just from a pure skill standpoint, but he just kind of embodies everything. I think in the back end, obviously we knew coming into this year we were going to replace 4 or 5 back end players, and not just routine players, really good players. So he brings a little substance back there that got a lot of game experience a year ago, not just in the games, but the preparation for the games. He's been a little bit of an assistant coach out there during the field, on the field during practice, also during the home game last week. But obviously excited to get him. Also should get Zeke Holmes back a little bit this week. He's going to basically be cleared, and what he does this week will kind of determine what he can do on Saturday. So excited to get 2 more defensive players back with us. Continued growth out of some of our other guys offensively. Julian obviously left the game with a dislocated finger, but he'll be back with us. Shouldn't have any issues there. And then really nobody else from a health standpoint. So really Penn State, obviously a very, very good football team, complete football team offensively, very explosive, very productive, got a lot of different weapons at all skill positions, a good offensive line. Guys that we recruited, guys at Norzad, their interior player was a guy we had on visit here, so we know a lot about some of these guys. That's what's kind of fun now in our league play. We'll start to see a lot of guys that we not only know because we compete against some guys that we recruited, and you can kind of get a little bit different perspective once that begins to happen. And defensively, I've known Manny for a long time. I don't believe we've ever crossed paths actually on the field, but tremendous respect for him as a coordinator and what he does, and they bring a lot of different looks, a lot of different pressures. So tremendous challenge. And special teams, they have transitioned a little bit since we were there last time. So some new phases, even though it's a game just 2 years ago, it's a completely different script for us. Basically in game planning. So with that, open up for questions.
Aaron had mentioned it's been a challenging few days. What's been challenging about it in secondary?
One of the things we commonly talk about in our program, it's one of the best things that can happen is you grow a lot from difficult conversations, right? And obviously when you have things that you need to correct and things that need to be done, those conversations aren't as easy as when they are very successful, right? So for Aaron, for the defensive staff, for the offensive staff, really just to go back, revisit so that we can move forward is never easy. I think about it all the time, right? Like half of the teams in college football lose every weekend, right? And here at Illinois, to have a loss hurt, and it hurts a lot of people, right? Like obviously I can read the tone of your articles, right? And people that write, right? It matters, right? Matters to people in the community, it matters to our administration. So to have that relevance, I think, is a good thing, but also the disappointment of that makes it a challenge as well. So we had to have some conversations, but on the same point, you can't let Kansas beat you twice, right? So we got to jump into our preparation, learn from our mistakes, make the adjustments we need to correct, and especially for our players and coaches.
From your assessment watching the film, what are the issues defensively for you, and what are some of those possible corrections and things you look at when you assess it?
Well, I think that you can appreciate, right? Like we're getting ready to play Penn State, so I don't really want to talk about what we think the issues are, right? That would be a little bit of a silly comment, but I would just tell you, for us, I think it's obvious that if you give up a certain number of yards, if you give a certain number of points, you give up a certain number of third down conversions, you do certain things, it's just not a recipe for success. So we got to correct the things that we believe in, especially on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. There's some things we've done well second half in both games defensively. We've made some good adjustments and made it happen. We just spotted them too much on the front end. Obviously, end of half has been an issue defensively. Offensively, we've done some really good things in the red area, which was a point of contention a year ago. Some things we really concentrated on that side of it. We've really done offensively good at the end of halves, right? But obviously the flip side of it, defensively, we've given up 2 scores at the end of half, which we can't do, because that really has been kind of, in my opinion, the deciding drive on both the game that we won against Toledo and the game that we lost at Kansas. That end of half score was a really big part of the game.
Brett, obviously these are 2 good teams you've played. How much you gain from that 2-game sample size as a staff? Like how much? do you
Yeah,
learn
you
about
know,
yourself?
obviously I wasn't here when either one of these games were scheduled. You know, you look around the league and you see who teams are playing and what the results are, right? And I knew that these were going to be two games out of the gate before we got into Penn State that were going to be very difficult games to prepare to win. And obviously we come out of a 1-1. Love to be 2-0, but we could have been 0-2, so we're 1-1, and we're going to live with it and roll with it. I think the biggest thing that we also took a year ago at this time, we were sitting in the exact same scenario. We were a 1-1 football team after a disappointing Friday night road game loss, right? And so there's a little bit of a rewrite of that, although completely different season scripts and all that goes into it. But it's not like we haven't been here before. I believe Penn State is ranked 7th, which is exactly what they were ranked last time we were playing them. So there's a lot of commonalities that we've seen before, right? And I think the dreams and aspirations of our room haven't changed just because of the results of one game.
Building off that, how do you keep that perspective with the guys that you've been doing this a long time? You have a lot of season left, although you're still frustrated with the results.
Well, I get the question, but I really we do take a 1-0 mentality approach. We just, you know, one of the things that we did this year, we didn't even really have season goals. I just said this is going to be the goal of our season, is to go 1-0 on a weekly basis. And obviously the first week we were able to achieve that. Last week we didn't. So that it allows you in the most difficult moments to stay on the task at hand. So we have 12 opportunities to prepare a game week preparation and execution to see where we get on game day. And I think that's really a way to kind of keep the guys moving forward and not have them dwell too much on the past. I would tell you as coaches, what I've learned in 15 years as head coach, 30 years in this business, coaches take it a lot harder than players, just because it just stays with you a little bit longer. Players got a million different things. I'm not saying it affects them. It definitely affects us. Those players came in, I think, in our building on Saturday. It was an NCAA by rule day off, so we couldn't meet with them. But I had a lot of players walking by, a lot of guys reach out to me, a lot of guys in the building. We had soft tissue recovery and the treatment room open, and I know we had a large amount of, well, the majority of our 74-man travel roster was through.
I gotta ask.
Yeah.
You guys are supposed to have a pregame show here on Saturday with Fox.
Oh, yeah.
That's been changed. Just curious what your reaction was, and maybe when that became clear to you.
You know, it really wasn't a big deal to me to begin with. So when it was mentioned to me on Saturday, whenever I was made aware of that, I literally just took that as a responsibility of me, right? Like, my responsibility as a head coach was to win football games, and obviously they have the right to choose that. I don't understand the process. Like, I was kind of a little bit when it first popped up, like, okay, they're announcing this far in advance. I just had never been a part of that. So I'm all for it. Yeah, giddy up rodeo. But I also, literally, I remember the week of the Kansas game, there was something that popped up that we were going to start to announce things about the Penn State game. I said, whoa, right? Like, I don't want to put that out in front of, that's just how I'm wired, right? So ironically, the whole way it worked out plays out that way. But obviously Penn State won, we didn't. And for us to do what we want to do, we got to focus on task at hand. I don't really get worked up about things I don't have a voice in.
Brett, do you anticipate Aaron will continue to call the defense and be the coordinator, or from an operational standpoint, is that something that's on the table for change?
I think that's probably the most ridiculous question you've ever asked me, but I'll answer it and be, yeah, unequivocally no. He's defense coordinator. I think the part that I've been able to do through 15 years as a head coach is you just understand there's going to be transition whenever these things happen. My first year as a defense coordinator, we went from a defense that was ranked, I believe, in the 80s to #1, and the next year we dropped considerably. Just a lot of different change of personnel, and people learn to attack your scheme and where it is. Aaron and the defensive staff are a very intelligent crew. We've met a lot before last Friday, and we met a lot afterwards, and we'll continue to grow and get better.
Yeah, Aaron mentioned that I guess most of the scoring drives against you have been prolonged by, a
Penalties.
penalty. Just, I mean, were there similarities between the two games, just in terms of what was happening, or just general penalty?
Yeah, so I think in the first game, we made a mention of it. I talked to the players involved. Obviously, we had a face mask, we had a post-snap penalty, we had 2 DPIs, we had a low hit on a quarterback, right? And those all those drives contributed to 20 points. This past weekend, much to the same. Obviously, we had a face mask early on that was in a low red that was on Ryan Mead, and I think in certain situations, like even the week before with Johnny, there's going to be certain fouls that happen during a game that it's just it's just part of the game, right? They're trying to reach and meet. What we can't have is post-snap penalties and repeated issues. I made a special point. I watch everything, offense, defense, special teams, and there's a play when they get Taz for a post-snap penalty, and they're kind of involved in a scrum. They're kind of grabbing with a TV copy. You literally see the Kansas wide receiver blow a kiss to the sideline, right? And saw the reaction of those guys. So that was something they had probably tipped off the officials that they're trying to get across, and it was definitely something that they coached and got a reaction. So I made our guys aware of, right? That's not a normal sequence, right? So I think our guys have to learn restraint is very, very big part of the game, and we got to do a better job of that, even when you're provoked.
As part of the assessment, coach, just taking a look at the depth chart and specifically the offensive line and maybe the back end of the defense, and any personnel changes that you anticipate?
Yeah, I think anytime you add players or get players back, one of the downfalls or one of the difficult parts for a couple guys is they had not really gotten a lot of practice and reps in before those first games, and I think that reflected in the way they've been able to play. So we've been healthy now for about 2 weeks, and obviously get a lot healthier this week with a couple of those guys back on defense. But yeah, we get better with practice. A short week, I think, was also something that, as we look at it, we talked about it, preached about it, but it took one less day of practice for us, and it was something we definitely needed in the type of offense we were facing, and obviously the defense that we played against as well. So they had the same amount of prep time, right? But it was just a little bit different for our guys traveling and everything.
Bret, how do you evaluate your offense? They've had some big deficits they're facing, but how would you evaluate what you've seen out of that group?
Well, I think we got to have an identity, right? Like, and be able to do some things and count on them and say this is what I like it to equate it to. Like when you hear people talk about us, an opposing coach, what do they say about us before and after the game? And you'd like to have some consistency there. Obviously, 2 opponents we haven't played, and 2 new season opponents, but. Luke is obviously a very talented quarterback who's got a very good skill set. I mean, take a third and long and convert it into a touchdown and really not get touched, right? Just goes, they were bracketing Isaiah out to the field, which he's going to get. He's a very good receiver. They were going man coverage across the rest, and they had a middle post safety that Pat Bryant came in and gave a nudge, and that's all Luke needed. And, it went from a third and long to a touchdown. When you have that on tape, that's a very good thing. So I think that's part of an identity that we haven't really had since I've been here, and that's a different. So we're a different offense. Barry. The reason I brought him here was a lot of the stuff at the line of scrimmage with relief on the perimeter and do certain things. When people would load up and put the box in on against us. So that has to be there, but we have to be a little bit more consistent, I believe, offensively on early down runs, and that's going to be a big part of it. And just stay in sequence. I showed a play. I believe it was a 6th or 7th play of the game, defensively, where we had Xavier Scott pulled the trigger, came up, knocked the ball loose, and we had 8 guys within 5 yards of the football. They had 1, right? And ball just bounced up and got in his hands. That's one that you would really hope that would go the other way. And then on the flip side of it, we had 2 offensive passes that were being bobbled, at the catch, and they came up with interceptions. So. The ball bounces in unique ways. You got to be able to overcome those situations. But I did point out to our guys, you got to create the way the ball bounces as well. So it's just one of those moments that we got to take a big learning step moving forward, but also not overreact to the moment.
Do you think it's been blocking some of that consistency on early down runs?
What's that?
What do you think has been maybe preventing finding that early down run consistency?
Well, 2 things. The teams that we played have been saying it. I think Reggie and Josh both have. Been very good in practice, and it's carried over. We just haven't been able to break one of those. There's been literally in both games a couple snaps that you felt like if he just could pull his legs through one more tackle, it'd be a big play hit. So I think those things are going to come. I do think we just got to keep chopping. We just got to keep working and keep grinding and understanding those plays are going to pop and they're going to come, but you got to earn them. No one's going to give them to you.
Right, not that it makes it easier, but is the prep for Penn State a little more familiar given their style and that you've seen it before?
Yeah, we have in a certain regard, but they do a lot. Penn State is primarily an 11 and 12 personnel team, but they have different guys within those personnel groupings. But that's majority of it. They play some 21. They have a couple other unique personnel groupings. I think one of the trademarks of James's teams is that, they play a lot of skill. They're deep. They do a tremendous job in recruiting, and they're allowed to do things there at Penn State to allow them to get a lot of skilled players in the program. And it seems like as soon as you have one leave, right, another one stands up right behind it. So that's the thing about Penn State. The volume of skill that can be on the field and be fresh is a challenge.
What's your next steps for your
One
offensive
more
line?
after this one.
Next step for the what?
Offensive line.
Yeah, I think three things. From an offensive game plan standpoint, we got to figure out what we do well and be able to stick to it, be able to practice it, be able to execute it not only during the course of the week but on game day. Second thing is we probably need to have one of those plays just happen, right? Like I think once the confidence is a big part of this game, and I think especially in a run game we haven't had one of those big plays happen yet, and when that does, that can be very, very contagious. And the third thing that we got to be able to do as coaches is put our best players in the best position to be successful. And if that's moving guys around, if that's playing guys at different positions, if it's getting guys a rep at different techniques, that's what we got to do as coaches, and that's what we'll do this week. One more?
Yeah,
So,
Yeah.
in the spring and fall, you guys have talked about playing fast.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's carried over?
Yeah, so offensively we always talk about see fast, no fast, play fast, and I think that's definitely it's showed at times. I think that's one of the ironic things in both ball games when we've gone 2-minute offense. You've had a lot of success defensively. You're at the discretion of what the offense wants to do and get our guys lined up and get our guys to play. But I would say that in general on defense, like we've gotten ourselves in a couple good scenarios and we just haven't been able to get off field on third down. Really all types of third down. We had a third and long, we had a third and short, we had a third and medium. That's got to be a big part of us. And then it's the third series of the game. The first two series results in touchdowns, and the third series we go 3 and out, right? And then turn around the fourth series, give one, and then create a turnover early in the second half, right? Like it's just like there's too much inconsistency in the results. I wouldn't say it's in the plays, but in the results is what matters, and that's what we got to be able to do. But you saw Xavier make a big play. You saw Dylan, rip the ball out, right? Like those are extra effort plays that you feel could be contagious, and even though they get unnoticed because we lost in a 2-score game, but as coaches we notice those things by far.
Thanks, guys.